So one of the things that I wanted to show you was how we configure notification groups. So as an administrator, I would come down here to alerts and I would go down here to actions. And those actions can be notifications like email. You'll also see action groups will usually have a mobile notifications action associated with them. If you're using the mobile app, this is how you control the time frames that it is valid to send alerts to the mobile app. So if you want to have some users only get notified during working hours, you can easily do that. All of the different contact methods can have different hours associated with them. So if you wanted to have it page someone after hours, but email them during working hours or both, those are also easily configurable. And you can go in and configure as many different action groups as you like. When an action group is executed, every action in that group will be executed. So whether that's a single email, for example, or whether that's multiple emails, or whether it's even a complicated, a script type action where we're actually calling a webhook to go launch a payload to a particular service, in this case Slack, but it could also be Twitter or a trouble ticketing system, or it could be a notification management system like PagerDuty, etc. You'll also see in these action groups, some of them have a little blue icon here that indicates a user access level, and that access level is what controls whether or not this group can be manually executed, and if so, what are the minimum permissions required to be able to execute it. There are 4 levels of user permissions in OmniCenter. So if I go in here to edit add web users, you can actually see the different access levels here. There is a power user, which is read-only plus configuration management tools. They cannot push configs to devices, but they can view configurations. There's user level, which is read-only access and no configuration access. There's a admin level. Admin level users have full administrative privileges, but only to the devices that are part of their user partition. So this is how a lot of your users are set up, where the network folks have full admin rights to all the network devices, but for example, no admin rights to firewalls. You can also then have super admins, which are root users, which basically have full permissions to everything, including editing the permissions of other users. Only super admins can actually get to the user administration page to take these actions. And of course, you can go in and do the standard functions for users, like you can force a password change if you need to reset that password, set it to something temporary, and then force the change. The next time they log in, they'll be prompted for that. This is also where you would set the user partition if you want to limit them to specific devices. And you can also set a custom dashboard as their default home page. So if your management users log in and want to get to the management page, they've got a view that they can go to specifically for that. They would set that as their user dashboard. Now, when I go to create those action groups, as I mentioned, I have to give the group a name. And if I want this to be manually possible to access an alert, I can set an access level. I don't have to do that. So a lot of times I'll just leave that set to none. When I create the group, then I have to give an action name. This is kind of a summary description for all of the actions underneath it. And you can have multiple different action names in there. The concept was originally that you might have multiple people in the group, and every person would have their own kind of name associated with different contact methods like email and pager, etc. That's rarely used nowadays, so you can kind of skip over it or just give it another name. But basically, it allows you to just kind of cluster all of the different emails together. Most of the time nowadays, email notifications are going out to mailing lists as opposed to individual users, is kind of the typical configuration we see, but you've got the flexibility to do either. So the different methods you can use for notification are email, mobile notifications, SMS via email, SNMP traps or webhooks for integration with other systems. There's also several actions here that are listed specifically as active response actions. And the main difference is that anything listed as an active response action will only happen on incident open or if executed manually. It will never happen for re-notifications or escalations or incident close or incident acknowledgement notifications. So that's important because if I put in a webhook, for example, that's a regular webhook and not an active response webhook, this will go off every time a new notification is sent to this group, which will include re-notifications, escalations, and acknowledgements and closures. So I would want to make sure this wasn't restarting a service or something. This was just posting to a Slack channel or sending a message into a text notification system or a scroller, things like that. The notification hours, these time frames are user configurable. It defaults to having basically working hours, non-working hours, 24/7, and none. These are the hours in which it is valid to send notifications or take this action against these devices. This will override any other setting. So for example, if I set this to active response SSH and I set this to only non-working hours, even if someone tries to manually execute that command during working hours, it will fail. It will not actually execute that command. So these notification hours give you a way to kind of create a safety net. So for example, some of our customers use this where if a particular service fails after hours, they just force a server reboot automatically. But if it happens during working hours, they want their techs to go in and look at it. So they set their automatic restarts to only operate during non-working hours, and then during working hours, the NOC has to go in and manually do it. So that's kind of an example of how that would get used. Most of the time that'll get set to 24/7, and you put in the command here, that you would execute exactly as you would want it executed from the device. So for example, if it needs to be a clear counters command, you would type it in just like you would once you were logged into the device. You can add additional methods to that action. So if I go down here and look at my test action, you can see it's red because it's not assigned anywhere. It's not in use. And currently there's a active response SSH, and by default, it'll always create this mobile notifications tag for each of the groups. When you configure the mobile app in OmniCenter, you'll actually you'll see in the settings all of the different action groups that are configured on your server, and you can pick which ones you want to have forwarded to your mobile app. So that's the idea behind this, is that if you've got all of these different service groups in the system, you can pick which ones you want to go to your particular mobile app. It doesn't have to be the same ones that you get emailed on, for example. It just gives you another method of notifications out of the system. And you can add additional methods or method names. You can add additional action names to these systems, just depending on what you want to be able to do, or remove specific ones that you don't necessarily need if you want to take the mobile notifications off of this one. Once you've got the action groups set up the way that you want them, if they're in use, you'll be able to click on that in use indicator and it'll tell you basically what it's set for. And in this case, there are 15 devices that are set with this contact group, and it's set as a host alert contact, and here's what its current state is. So you can actually see where the groups are in use if you need to change or replace them.